Committee. I'll ask the clerk to administer the oath. You have a choice between the Quran, the Bible, and affirmation depending on your faith.
I, Davis Chirchir, do hereby swear to testify on all matters in question and tell this committee the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Thank you.
Honorable Davis Chirchir, welcome to this committee of Parliament. This committee is chaired by the Speaker of the National Assembly, and it has 20 members who will engage you in finding out your suitability to discharge the responsibility and duties in the office that His Excellency has nominated you as a Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum. In this meeting, I want to advise you that the members are all distinguished members, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves to you. Then I'll give further direction for us to proceed. Our engagement with you will be 90 minutes, and we'll try to keep as much within that time as possible. Let me start with the Deputy Speaker.
My name is Gladys Boss, member for Uasin Gishu County and Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Karibu.
Kimani Ishongwa, member of Parliament Kikuyu.
My name is Opio Wandai, MP Ugunja.
Junet Mohammed, Suna East.
Owen Baya, Kilifi North, a member of Parliament.
Robert Mbui Kadhiani.
Rehab Mukami, County MP Nyeri.
I'm Ferdinand Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Kwanza, Trans Nzoia County, Republic of Kenya.
George Gitonga Murugara, Member of Parliament for Tharaka Constituency, Tharaka Nithi County.
Mashmap Kosing, David, MP Pokot South, West Pokot County.
Abdul Rahim Daoud, MP for North Imenti, Meru County, and a member of this committee.
Honorable Mishi Mboko, MP Likoni.
Nelson Arab Koech, MP Belgut.
Caleb Amisi, MP Sabot.
Ido Raso, MP Saku.
Abdi Shuri, MP Balambala, Garissa County.
Mary Yamase, MP Teso South.
Stephen Mule, MP Matungulu.
David Gikaria, Nakuru Town East Constituency.
Naisula Lesuda, Samburu West.
Honorable Chirchir, the engagement with us is not adversarial. It's an engagement to ask you questions based on materials placed before the committee and any other matter that the members may wish to ask you. The questions have to be short, precise, concise, and we expect similar answers. Avoid any attempt to engage directly with members, even if they ask questions that you are uncomfortable with. Address them through the chair. And members are equally advised that engage the nominee through the chair so that we have an orderly process. We will, after going through the preliminaries, give you 10 minutes or less, the lesser the better, to tell us briefly about the story of your life. And at the end of the proceedings, we'll avail you another 3 minutes to tell us your wish or anything of that nature. We want to start by asking you a few questions, procedural issues on the requirement for documentation. If you have supplied them to us, the clerks will still want to see your originals to compare with what you have given us. This can be done as we go on. Do you have the tax compliance certificate? Use the mic.
I do, Chairman.
Do you have the Higher Education Loans Board clearance?
Mr. Chairman, Speaker, I do.
Do you have a clearance with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission?
I submitted the documents and I think they were writing to you directly, but I have the stamped...
you have the stamped questionnaire?
Correct, correct.
That is what is required, but we have received a direct communication from them. Do you have a certificate of good conduct from the DCI?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker.
We also have a letter written by them. Have you ever been charged in a court of law or convicted of an offense as a consequence of that charge?
No, I haven't.
Are you a dual citizen of any country apart from being a Kenya citizen?
No, I'm just...
You hold only one passport?
Citizenship, yes, John.
In your journey through life, what is your financial net worth?
My financial net worth as declared in my documentation is 400, and let me get the exact amount so that we don't have to... 400, I think 498. I'll just clarify that very quickly.
Speak closer to the mic.
I'll do that, yeah. Chairman, my financial network as have declared in item number 25 in the criteria for vetting and approval is 482,200,000.
Tabulated as?
Tabulated as farms in Olengurwane, Kipsonoi, a house in Spring Valley at 95, my current residence, some rental property in Westlands, in Matundu, valued at 50 million, vehicles, bank account, and investment in a family tea value addition business called Chebango EPZ Tea Company at 185 million, a total of 482,200, Chairman.
Right. Are those your current sources of income?
Yeah.
What are your anticipated sources of income?
My anticipated source of income accruing to about 12 million shillings annually, coming from salaries, farm, and rental, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now avail you. You're under 10 minutes to tell this committee the journey of your life.
Mr. Chairman, let me confirm again that I'm Davis Chirchir, born some 62 years ago in a village in Kericho called Cheptigit, but soon migrated to Bomet. It was the larger Kericho district those days. where we've settled to date. I went to local primary schools in Bomet, specifically today Sotik constituency, in a village called Kipketi, and progressed through my primary education, joined Kericho High School between 1974 to 1978, Form 6, 1979 and 80, and I joined university in 1981 to do a course in physics and computer science. I graduated in 1985 and joined the then Kenya Post and Telecommunication Corporation, where I went for what was called traffic engineering course to be able to handle management of traffic engineering in telecommunication for 9 months at the now Kenya Multimedia University, then Central Training School. I worked and rose through the ranks to be the general manager in charge of information technology and change management, where I served for 10 years between the year 1993 to the year 2003. I left Telecom briefly as change manager chairman. I handled the liberalization and the opening up of the telecom market.
Mr. Chirchir, the Hansard reporters say try to move closer to the mic. But you can raise it, can't you?
As general manager, Mr. Speaker, in telecom...
Yes, hold on. Is that any better? Okay.
As general manager in Telecom Kenya chairman, at the advent of the world liberalization in telecommunications, I participated and worked closely with the management in government to draft legislations, having done a lot of work on the legislative changes that were happening worldwide because of the changes in telecommunication, and basically got the communication authority legislation at that time that became the regulator, and got Telecom Kenya to operate under the Companies Act, while Postal Corporation did operate, of course, under the Postal Corporation of Kenya Act. It is then that we were able to license and give, because up to then telecommunication or postal service was a monopoly and a preserve of the government under the then Act, I think it was Cap 411 of the laws of Kenya, now repealed. And that's when we then brought in Safaricom, Celtel at that time, that have revolutionized the way we do business in this country and given us an edge over other African countries, because I think the legislation was properly done. I say so because just a few weeks ago, our neighbors like Ethiopia are only giving out a second mobile telecoms license, giving out an M-Pesa license to facilitate movement of cash and bankability of the unbanked people in the local communities. In 2007, I was out of telecom or out of public sector for a while, and I joined and spent more time in managing family business. In my documentation, I've also shown that we run a business called Bon Voyage Limited, which is a telecommunication company that supports Safaricom in a number of areas. And so I ran that company until 2007, when after the challenges of elections of 2007, I applied, because of the challenges we all faced in 2007, to really be part of the solution in reforming the electoral process in Kenya. I was taken in as a commissioner in the Interim Electoral Commission, where I served as a commissioner, and looking at the reform requirements to institutionalize good practices in elections as recommended by the people who came to assist us, including Joan Krigler, a judge, a renowned judge from South Africa. I was able to work there for 3 years, and we then established some of the great solutions we use today to manage our elections in this country. Upon the expiry of the term of the Interim Electoral Commission, I was sourced by one political party, then United Republican Party, to be the Secretary General, where I worked in that party, and having formed a coalition with the then TNA party, we were able to form government, and I was appointed as Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum. I served in that office for 2.5 years, and Speaker sir, in the excellent State of the Nation address of Thursday, 26th March 2015, my name was among the 175 names that were tabled in Parliament on allegations that I was not aware of, and I wrote to the President as he had basically requested those who had been mentioned to step aside. So I wrote to step aside to allow investigations to take place in line with Chapter 6 and the other clauses requiring integrity of an office such as the one I hold. In one paragraph, I did say, Chairman, in a public office, one must be worthy of the trust of those who place their trust on them. Accountability and integrity is of paramount importance in the public office, particularly the office such as the one I hold, and you have graciously appointed to, I've been graciously appointed to, and which I hold in trust of the citizens of Kenya. I therefore, Chairman, step aside to allow for investigations to be carried, and upon conclusion, the specific issue here that was of concern was what was eventually coined as the ChickenGate scandal, which was a collision, or a claim of a collision between the commission at that time, the staff of the commission, and maybe the commissioners, to get kickbacks to award a contract for printing of ballot papers to a company called Smith and Husman of the UK. I think I should state at this point that the investigations were completed, and I did manage to get documentation to prove that those who were found culpable were charged, and I was not one of them, Mr. Chairman. In 2007, because of my performance in every area of my works, I was still sourced to support Jubilee Party, and I was eventually the presidential chief agent in managing the elections of 2007, and Jubilee emerged the winner of that election. I would want to claim that because of really the fact that
07 or 2017?
2017, sorry, Chairman, 2017. And we did emerge winners in that election. And after that, I still continued to run the businesses I ran until 2022, when I was appointed to be the Chief of Staff in the office of the then Deputy President, now His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya. That is the long and the short story of Chirchir. I've worked with most members of Parliament in my small stint of a bit of political life, and therefore most of the members I see in the House are not new to me. And thank you, Speaker.
Chair, I'll now open the forum to members to ask you questions. They could be followed by one or two clarifications where necessary. But like I said, decorum of the highest level is expected. And I'll start with the Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Davis Chirchir, first I want to congratulate you for your nomination for appointment as Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum. I've worked with him at the Electoral Commission. I've worked with him also in the political formation of Kenya Kwanza, and as agents of the presidential candidate then. But I want to confirm that in no way, Honorable Chairperson, will my personal knowledge of him affect my judgment or will make me get engaged in any bias as we go through this vetting process. And with that, let's seek your permission to proceed to ask the question. Okay. Mr. Davis Chirchir, I want to ask you questions that Kenyans are asking. That's what I've been doing throughout this process. Things that matter to Kenyans. Kenyans are asking, the cost of electricity is one of the highest in the region, and this affects the cost of production, hence the cost of many of the basic commodities that are required by wananchi. It's also said that the high cost of electricity is because of the loop-sided contracts between KPLC and independent power producers. Yet, despite the fact that Kenya is endowed with wind, solar, and geothermal renewable energy resources, so the question Kenyans will want to hear from you is, what steps will you take should you be approved as Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum to ensure that you mitigate and deal with these challenges that are facing Kenyans? Thank you.
Davis, you'll have to hold. We'll do batches of 4 questions. Then you come to answer all of them together. So you can indicate as we go along. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Davis, you've alluded to the so-called ChickenGate scandal that made you step aside in the year, was it 2015? 2014, thereabout, and investigations that followed. Would you be privy to the outcome of those investigations? What became of those investigations now that you are not reappointed to cabinet in 2017, as much as it was the prerogative of Uhuru Kenyatta to appoint or not to appoint you, but you went ahead to be appointed as Chief of Staff in the Office of the Deputy President this year? Is that to mean nothing came of the investigations, or what was the issue? Two, if you are approved, and you had begun some very good work with the last mile program, the first time of the Jubilee administration. But as the Honorable Sholai says, Kenyans are really concerned on the performance today of our power generation and the power transmission companies, especially KPLC. Hundreds of thousands of Kenyans today are connected to power. Some consuming that power and not paying for it because KPLC is unable to provide them with meters. Many others have applied for a connection of power, but they cannot get connected, again on the excuse that there are no meters. Connection, transmission connection, and billing of power in this country a little bit.
Personally, I haven't had a chance to interact with you or to work with you previously. This could be the first engagement I'm having with you at a close range. That notwithstanding, of course, there are certain things which are not adding up. And why do I say so? Just to pick from where Honorable Chunga has left, you've indicated that you stepped aside, or you are forced to step aside. Because I was in the House then, 2015, when the President came to Parliament and read the names of those who had fallen short of the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. And therefore you are forced by circumstances to step aside. And you say investigations were conducted. I'm not sure if you are aware when they were concluded. But that notwithstanding, from your own submission, you said that you then participated actively in the campaigns of 2017, and your coalition won. Isn't it curious, then, that from 2015 to 2022, you are essentially out of public service, and yet your coalition won in 2017, and the president, of course, is appointing authority. Could have the reasons why he didn't appoint you, but I'm sure he could have been curious enough to find out from the president or whoever it was why you are not featuring among the appointees, having worked so hard to deliver the victory, and also having been cleared, if at all you are cleared by the investigations. So secondly, until you came, of course, on board much later in 2022 as a chief of staff in the office of the deputy president, at the tail end of the term of the government. But that is very curious. Two is, I'm sure you are aware, because it's in public domain, that executives of Smith and Usman were eventually tried, convicted, and indeed jailed in the UK. Two of them, a man and his son, for having bribed the interim electoral commission officials with 50 million Kenya shillings. So the bribers were convicted and jailed. So those who were bribed have to date remained scot-free, if you may ask me. And to Kenyans, of course, you are one of the suspects, because it was in public domain. So you may need to update us as a committee what you could be knowing as far as the outcome of these investigations are concerned, and if at all any action has been taken against any person that was involved in this scandal on the Kenyan side. Because as Honorable Nyet said earlier on, the requirements of the Constitution at Chapter 6 are so stringent, yes, that any slight indication, any slight suspicion that you are not having a proper integrity could bring out of question marks in Kenyans' minds. So kindly help us understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Junet.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, mine is brief. I wanted to ask the nominee that if you look, even though you are out of office by then, but the last 5 years, the places where there have been many cases relating to corruption, even though now we can tell them they are politically instigated, but let's say politically instigated corruption, let me use it for the good of it, that word, were majorly in the energy sector. If you look at Kenya Power, if you look at Kenya Pipeline, if you look at this, what is your view? Because that must be the thing that is making the cost of living, that must be the thing that is making the cost of electricity very high in this country. What do you think you'll do differently? Because you left office in 2015, then another CS came in, he looked like he continued with a trend that could have made the cost of electricity and the cost of energy very high in this country. What is your view? Is there corruption in the energy sector, or it is as clean as a snow and all those cases were politically instigated?
Davis, you can answer those four.
Thank you, Chairman, and for those four questions, I'll run through them, starting with the Mheshimiwa Shole, Gladys Shole, on the cost of electricity and whether the contracts are lopsided. Having served as CS Energy and Petroleum, I can say with some level of authority, I understand the sector and the challenges which basically afflict this particular industry. Electricity in Kenya is predominantly generated from hydro, about 30%, running down Kindaruma all the way to Kitaru, the cascaded water dams out there, the Tana Delta. And that's about 30%. We've since developed geothermal, and glad for the House or the members of this committee to know that geothermal, Kenya is quite a significant player in the geothermal industry. Whereas we have about another 800 megawatts of geothermal, we are actually the 6th largest geothermal user worldwide because of the technology and the knowledge, the support of government and parliament in investing in geothermal development. We then have today quite a bit of wind coming out of Loengalani, and solar from Garissa and the small solars all over the place, totaling to about 3,000 megawatts. The challenge that maybe what I've not mentioned is the heavy fuel generators, which also amounts to about 600 megawatts, which were brought in to mitigate the challenge of drought sometimes in the 90s. They were basically meant, they are quick to deploy, and so when you have a problem, you bring in an Agreco, it comes in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It is meant to mitigate a drought challenge, but they've become a permanent feature in the generation of power to our grid. Diesel generation is very expensive. If you look at, I think I tried to tabulate somewhere, from hydro today, we generate power and put it on the grid at about between 3 to 4 cents US. Geothermal is at about 7 cents US, and so is solar. The earlier signed solar were at about 12 cents, but since then, the devices have really come down, and the price of solar today, we could even get it for 5 cents US, 6 cents US, and so on and so forth. To compare with the thermal generators, we're talking about 20 to basically summarize on the cost of electricity, as a student, I didn't mention that I did a master's in international management. And in strategic management, in one course, you get the global farms. Global farms are farms who manufacture out of their home countries because of the advantages they draw from cost of manufacturing. Out of UK today, cost of labor is so expensive. Japan, cost is expensive. Germany, the cost of doing everything is expensive. So they relocate to places like China, Ethiopia, Kenya, because of the cost of doing business. If then our cost of doing business starting from power or human resource is high, we miss that opportunity. Global firms look for least cost countries who offer competitive advantage through power. That's why we are doing the SEZs and so on and so forth. So it's one thing that we must address quickly and put Kenya where it belongs in the state of nations. So those are some of the steps we need to look at. I think it's teamwork. We need to bring everybody on the table. One question which I asked myself when I was nominated for this position is really how do I navigate this challenge, and more particularly the fact that everybody, Chair, in the energy sector, when you see the mission and vision, the mission particularly of all these organizations, Geothermal Development Company, KenGen, Kenya Power, they talk about competitive price power. But do we really mean, do we understand, are we competitive? Competitive against who? When we are a monopoly. We should be competitive against the world prices of delivering power to the grid to be able to attract some of these global firms. So, Chair, I am up to the task. I'm aware of the challenge, and we need to address it to basically put Kenya where it ought to be. Mheshimiwa Ichung'wah Anthony, am I privy to the outcome of the investigation on ChickenGate? For a long time, I assumed that the file had been closed, and I was correct, but I didn't have any documentation until when I was invited for vetting, and there was one affidavit done by the CEO for the Transparency International. She's called, I think I have the document here. She's Sheila Masinde, and Sheila Masinde did an affidavit, and basically the clerk to the National Assembly, Sarah Kioko, called me, and I picked a copy of it, and I learned that my name had been mentioned in respect to ChickenGate. I went to my lawyer and asked them to confirm whether the file had been closed, because investigations had been, in my own understanding, had been finished. Those who were found culpable had been taken to court and charged, and I've got a letter done to the clerk of the National Assembly, which is basically absolving me of any liability in terms of those who are found culpable, and I do expect that the clerk should have put that in the file, Mr. Chairman, to clarify and close this issue once for all. So I've done also a sworn affidavit to confirm and respond to the affidavit of Sheila Masinde to that extent. So that, whereas I assumed that had been closed, at least I was actually happy for a moment that we do this confirmation hearing, because it gives us the opportunity to check our past, confirm our tax compliance.
We can't see the letter he's referring to.
You have a copy of that letter?
I have a copy of that letter, Chairman.
Share with us through the clerk. But I saw it at clerk's office.
That's a letter. So, Chairman, I've done that. I did leave 2 copies with the clerk yesterday, because I just did get the affidavit on Saturday evening. So, Chairman, I do expect that, whereas I assume that the case had been closed.
Chair, on a point of order, maybe just in the interest of saving time for the committee, the clerk's office should supply such documents and circulate them. Because if we had them, there was even no need then of, probably no need of asking the question if there's already something.
And I already gave instructions that any document received from the nominee or any of the government agencies or any affidavits, adverse or otherwise, should be circulated to members in good time. So going forward, Florence, arrange to do that, especially for the remaining nominees.
So, Chairman, I then did an affidavit to respond to Sheila Masinde, and I did forward yesterday, but for a moment I was a bit disappointed because my name and my character was put to question for several years through a document that was placed before Parliament, and I would expect that Parliament should protect its citizens so that we do not work down careers of serious citizens in this country when people make allegations. But I was also quite happy that the Approval Act of Parliament does require that submissions of any adverse concern about anybody be done through an affidavit, a sworn affidavit, so that we do not have claims and mischief of people trying to pull out down people's characters. So in terms of the vetting process, I think it was well thought out that, Chairman, we do require that we do sworn affidavits, and so that the face of the person complaining and not unnecessarily pulling somebody's character and career down is able also to stick out and say, I want to stand against an integrity issue and therefore be able to corroborate what exactly the challenge is. As regard the concern of generation and transmission, which was raised by, again, Mheshimiwa Anthony Chungwa, it's cross-cutting from what Mheshimiwa Gladys Boshole did ask, and I think I've touched on that question, but let me just go into one area of why I think we really need to address the power sector, the cost of energy in this country. There's been for a while, I think because of the monopoly of Kenya Power, or what would actually, I think the Energy Act 2019 has addressed that monopoly to some extent. It's just implementation. But to a very good extent, the customer service, which is really more of a big challenge that we need to address, because we look at customers, and a customer is a person who buys and buys again. They are not buyers. We really are permanently with Kenya Power and Lighting, and we need to have a relationship with Kenya Power in terms of understanding. Even the bill is so complicated. We need to really understand and improve the customer service and customer relationships. In my MBA course, Chairman, I did put deliberately a document on one of my term papers. One of my term papers, Chairman, in my MBA is a case of a company which was in medical insurance called CRM Implementation Failure at Cigna Corporation, which when I review today tells the story about our energy sector in terms of failure to recognize customer relationship and more dealing with being just transactional basis. And I would like to encourage members to look at that term paper. It almost reflects how we behave in the energy sector to our customers, how when our numbers are, the bottom line numbers are not adding up, we push it to the customer instead of mapping out change strategy to address.
That is very good. Tell the committee what we are going to do to stop this.
It's one of my first assignment, Chairman, to basically look at the cost structure of our parastatals. I think we generate power, for example, at $4, $5 on the renewable energy, and when we give it to Kenya Power to distribute, they distributed another 4 to 5 cents. It's not acceptable. And so we must look at our distribution cost to be able to bring down the cost of power. We must look at the strength of the network in a very structured way. We must decouple. I think what we did sometimes was the generator is KenGen, the transmission is Kentraco, the off-taker is Kenya Power. But if you seriously look at how we operate today, sometimes NREA does the social obligation of doing the last mile and the providing power to our homes. When you look at the decoupling of services between Kenya Power and REA, I think REA today is called REREC, Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation. You cannot draw a clear line on who does what. Kenya Power tend to do more of social work, which cannot really, as a commercial entity, the social work should be done by REA, and which is funded by government. So we don't fund REA, and the other work is being done by Kenya Power, and then they owe one another. De-risking the fields for geothermal development. Building power generations today, which is the space for KenGen. And Kentraco and Kenya Power, you can't distinguish where transmission ends and where distribution starts. So we need to sit down as a team and work on full decoupling and understanding the role of one body against another body. If Mheshimiwa Hussein wants to pull some power in Pokot South to some end, it is the role of REREC to do that, not Kenya Power, as a social obligation. And we will bring budget to the House to support that, to ensure that the last mile is fully covered, and not use a commercial entity like Kenya Power, who then loads the losses to the customers in the commercial sectors, and we end up losing our serious businessmen because of cross-subsidy. The subsidy should be left and be done within the social context of REREC, and we leave Kenya Power to do the more commercial work as an off-taker, pay KenGen what is due to the generators and the PPPs. I'm told today KenGen is owed, and the other PPPs are owed over 23 billion because of failure of Kenya Power to pay. So, Chairman, there is work to be done. We're going to do it, and I understand that space to a very good extent.
Davis, we are not doing very well on time.
Let me
we'll spend about 30 minutes,
I think,
on 2 questions.
Chairman, I've answered to a very good extent Mr. Wandai's question of ChickenGate. And I think the only challenge is really, yes, it was in the public domain. I do also expect that my members of parliament to defend me to some very good extent, so that I should not have been out for several years on an allegation and a file that had been closed. So, Wandai, you owe me for not, it came to the House should have, not just for Chirchir, the House should really protect Kenyans so that we don't trample on people's careers.
Mr. Speaker, just a point of order. Mr. Speaker, you know, Mr. Chirchir is making very serious allegations. But I should have helped him to get back to the cabinet, when you know very well that the coalition that formed the government was not my coalition. Really.
Chair, I think with your permission, the nominee might not be very wrong, because he is aware that eventually the person who had asked the CS to step aside, President Uhuru Kenyatta, ended up being a leader in the party that Honorable Pio Wandai is now leader of.
You didn't have to cross to our side.
Yeah.
You know, our side is angry.
With your permission,
yes.
It's only that we want to stay with the decorum as you ordered. Yes. I almost veered off to election rigging and other issues. I just left. I told Ushunga I'm not going there.
Can we have the next batch? Owen, Robert, Rugara, and Koech. Davis and honorable members, we are doing very poorly on time. Now, please ask precise questions. Let's get precise answers.
Okay.
Yes.
Chair, thank you very much, Davis Chirchir. I would like to ask you a question on in terms of power use, electricity, and productivity of water. That the tariff used for producing water using electricity is higher than that of street lights, and areas like the coast where you have to pump water up, and other areas in this country where you have to pump water that goes up to homes, the cost of production is very high, such that water companies in those areas cannot break even because they spend more money on electricity than for the water. And yet, the policy at the ministry has not changed for many years, and that people are suffering, that there's a lot of water power disconnection in waterworks by KPLC because they are demanding that they be paid the commercial tariff. And yet you find that streetlights have a special tariff. What are you going to do about this to ensure that we say water is life, water is the engine of all productivity in this country, and actually there's a correlation between poverty and water? How are you going to assist the other ministry to ensure that we have water and there's no interruption?
Robert Mbui.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to refer the committee to page 5 on the documents presented for this nominee. Office of the Chief of Staff of the Deputy President, considering that the Deputy President's own salary is only 1.2 million per month.
Thank you, Chairman. Nominee, after water in life, electricity is next. So the ministry you're being vetted for is one of the most important in the country, especially to the rural persons who are yet to see electricity. The unit for measuring supply of connectivity of electricity in the country are constituencies. And the problem we have is the disparity between some constituencies and others, such that I talk about my own constituency, which in 2017 was at 9.5% connectivity. In spite of every work I did in 5 years, we were able to move it up to a maximum of 30%. There are other constituencies, and I have data of that, who are now at 100%. My question to you is this: what are you going to do to reduce or remove the disparity between constituencies, whether rural or urban, as far as electricity supply is concerned? Because Kenyans out there are now waiting to be connected to the national grid.
Honorable Courage.
Waziri, mine will be in Kenya Power. Actually, the story of the energy sector starts and ends with Kenya Power and Lightning. In fact, nowadays in Kenya, there's a famous quote, kwamba when it rains, saile sisi tunatoa nguo, Kenya Power pia inaanua wire. Power just goes off. It is something that you must find a way of fixing. And it goes beyond policies. There must be a deliberate, I think there's a deliberate attempt by some officers in Kenya Power to disallow connection of power. That is why they visit your house on a Friday, disconnect power so that they get something, and then again when you reconnect is when they can restore the supply. Number two is on revenue collection by Kenya Power and meter reading. You find Kenya Power staff having to dodge vicious dogs in people's compounds, yet you can actually use technology to do meter reading and give estimates on what should be built. Thank you.
Davis, can the answers be as brief as the questions?
I'll be brief, Chairman. Income, Chairman, as I declared, is accurate. In 2022, I earned 3 million between January and March from my previous sources, as indicated from 2021. Storage technologies to be able to improve the power in our network or in our system, and we can be able to pump water back to the dam using energy at night when we don't need energy out of wind or solar during the day, so that we can reuse that water. The challenge of maybe harmonizing the sector is work very closely with WARMA to ensure that we do cooperate and see the meeting points on how much we should pay for the water we use to generate power, so that the water then given to the
Chairman, I think he didn't catch my question. That's why he skipped it. I asked, why is the tariff of water higher than any other thing, especially when you're producing? You have waterworks in Sabaki. Kenya Power disconnects water because the water providers cannot meet the cost of production. When are we looking at a reduction of water production tariff in terms of electricity?
Service provider is high. Isn't that so? Yes. Why is it so?
the challenges of Ukraine and Russia the one investor who manages the facility, the private investor. If we open up that space, and I've seen the strategic plan of NOC and the energy sector, we want to move to 13 kilograms per capita use of gas per household. If we do that, some of the very, very interesting gains will be like, let me run that against the forest cover. Again, some 15 years ago, we were at 4% forest cover. Today, we are at 12. If we move the use of gas to 13 kilograms per household and stop using biomass, because the underside is we are cutting wood to burn for our houses. If we just improve by 5% to go to 13%, the forest cover will go up from 12% to 22%, which is so significant. So we can talk about planting 3 million trees until the cows come home, or we can, yes, and we need to do that, but we can quickly accelerate the facility in Mombasa for gas trading, manage the initiatives that we had started, address the global warming by reducing the carbon dioxide, which is not good for our environment and the ozone layer. On fuel, I think we've talked quite a bit on fuel to the extent that we really need to quickly develop our own resource and ensure that we are not over-reliant on our brothers out there, and to whether refine it here or refine outside. You know, there is in the production sharing contract, the government has a stake in any discovery, so we can buy into our share of the petroleum that has been discovered, and be able to use that to address our strategic challenges. Mishimbogo, renewable energy, Lake Turkana, I think we've talked quite a bit about that. And power generation, there'll be a lot of learning, albeit the challenges and the mistakes we have made from power when we do the power purchase agreements. Because when a private developer does, like Leongalani, which is the Lake Turkana we are talking about, they get what you call a PPA, a power purchase agreement, which is a document which helps them to raise banks, whether in the international market, to develop that facility. So unless the impropriety is coming at the negotiations of the PPA, if the private investor does funny games during the development of the project, it does not change the structure and the cost structure on the PPA. So maybe to just simply answer your question, we need to look more critically into what goes into our PPA. Are we generous? Are we giving them too much in the PPA so that they play games? And therefore, because it locks the cost of power, it is locked at the PPA stage, which is done before the project picks up. I'm told by my predecessor, if I get approved, Monica Juma, that she has since moved the PPA negotiations to the ministry and will work more closely with the off-taker, which is Kenya Power, to ensure that the PPAs do reflect the cost of power that we would like to drive this economy. Because like I said earlier, if we are going to attract global firms, the cost of our energy is basically not acceptable. We have to bring it down, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Davis. I think we'll end here with you.
Can I finish, Ferdinand? Was that a comment or a question?
He just made a comment.
It was a comment. deliver in line with the timelines. If it belongs to Kenya Power, let's be very clear about those definitions of responsibilities. Thank you, Chairman.
One question is not answered.
Mishi?
The one on the monopoly.
Mishi, I'd indicated, and I didn't want to speak very loudly because of the fact that we have quite a bit of letters of support as government to Kenya Power, and we need to support Kenya Power even as to this honorable house today again after being nominated for the position of energy and petroleum to see whether we can together rebuild this country. The cost of power is a fundamental driver in the economic foundation of any nation, and unless we together address the cost of power, the power mix, the power security, like I said earlier, when we talk about competitive cost of power and we want to bring investors into our special economic zones in Dongonkundu, in Olkaria, where we have ready steam for primary processing of leather, can we get the cost of power right? Kenya enjoys a very special place in the state of nations in that we do about 90% of green energy, and we are one of the qualifying countries to even go into green hydrogen, which is another phase of development in power and export of power in hydrogen, where it's a requirement that if you're going to go into this green area of development of green hydrogen, you must be using green energy to do that. And as we go forward, except for the challenges we are facing in the security of supply and the cost of power, the fact that Kenya today does about 90% of its energy on a renewable source of energy is one thing that really helps us to address the world climate. And even as we go to COP27 in Egypt in the next 2 weeks, we stand to challenge countries like Germany, who are folded back and they are going back to fossil fuels or coal. We stand to challenge countries like Britain, and I want to confirm, Chair, that with the development of human resource, with the development of geothermal and capacity that we've built and we are currently exporting into other countries neighboring us, we will be able to develop under my leadership, once confirmed, in the area of renewable energy, in geothermal, in wind, and in solar. I have the capacity, I have the strength, and I'm a team player. I want to work with this house, I want to work with the people in the energy sector to be able to deliver this for our country. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Davis. We will release you to go to your other duties. If there are any documents that you have not shared with us, do so with the Secretariat. Sergeant, as the distinguished member leaves, look for the Honorable Moses Kuria. Give us 5 minutes to stretch, members. 5 minutes to stretch, a healthy stretch, and 5 minutes, please. We start at 6:01.